These are the kinds of things that, people need to learn. And a lot of people don't. They think because they know all this math and physics that they know everything, and they don't. And this is the case with Sam Altman, because Sam Altman doesn't understand work.
Mm.
I did my PhD on the economics of robots. So I got very interested in work. What is work? What do they do? Well, I was kind of just looking at assembly robots. But, that's not all the work. There's all kinds of jobs in the world. And I remember reading so many books, about work and asking people what they did in the job, trying to figure out how jobs work. Sam Altman doesn't understand that. And most of these AI guys don't. They haven't really attempted to understand. They haven't hired people. Their marketing people are terrible. That's why they keep making these ridiculous statements and not targeting real work. You got to find the work that's easiest to do with AI.
My guest is Dr. Jeffrey Funk, a consultant, retired professor and researcher specializing in the economic impact, adoption, and potential drawbacks of new technologies such as AI. Is an author of multiple books, including the very popular Unicorns, Hype, and Bubbles, as well as over 50 academic papers. He strongly believes that technological progress is driven by genuine productivity gains, not just hype.
There will be a lot of wasted money. And that's what bubbles are about. The AI people all want to say, well, the AI is getting better, or there's this and that, and it's the most used technology all the time. When you come through a bubble, it's all about money. You put money in, you get money out. But if you're not getting money out, then the valuations, stock prices aren't worth it, and they'll eventually go down. The real issue is not, we get rid of Trump and everything will be fine. No, it's why do we have such bad choices right now? Why has the quality of presidents gone down so far that now I look at Carter and Reagan and I say, wow, they were great. Because at least because they were smart, and they appointed a lot of smart people to positions of power. We don't have that anymore. Anthropic finally realized that they were losing so much money really based on a few users because they had this unlimited usage model or subscription plan where you could use it as much as you want. And they found out that some people were incurring tens of thousands of dollars of cloud costs for a $200 a month service. So it's the tens of thousands of dollars that Anthropic had to pay the cloud providers just to have this $200 a month subscriber. Obviously, that's ridiculous. But the same thing or similar things are going on with all the software companies, from OpenAI to the rest of these companies. And so this isn't sustainable. This didn't exist in the dot-com bubble.
This is a CEO Retort podcast, the show that fearlessly goes after the difficult topics that we all need to talk about, campaigns for issues that we're all concerned about, and invites some amazing, inspiring, and remarkable guests who will help us navigate through this fragile world that we all care about. I'm Tim Al-Sheikh. Let's get after it.
You are listening to CEO Retort.
I was saying that you and I have been connected for quite a long time on LinkedIn, and we are part of a bunch of experts on LinkedIn that basically always go after the AI hype pushers and basically try to debunk all the nonsense that they push about AI, etc. So I felt, it's about time that we have a conversation and really sort of delve deeper into that, because, at the time of the recording of this video, finally, it seems to be that the AI hype, people starting to recognize that it is hype. And of course, the question is when will the bubble explode? As you know, I made a prediction that it would happen by the end of 2024, but I didn't know that Trump would become president, which of course he pumped the hype himself even further. Hence, it kind of prolonged the problem. So how do you see the bubble right now with AI? Is it really coming to an end?
Well, I've thought that it was going to come for an end for a long time. You can tell from the title of my book, Hype, Unicorns, Hype, and Bubbles, that this is something I saw for a long time, but I used to see it in startups. And so I called the great startup bubble that popped in 2022, 2021. because all these startups received record funding. There's a record amount of money being given to startups, and that bubble popped. And my book came out like a year after the generative AI bubble really became serious, and it's continued to become serious. And I thought the generative AI bubble would pop, for a long time, because there just isn't enough revenues to sustain it. You look at these huge amounts of money going to AI infrastructure, but you see so little coming out. For a long time, I focused on revenues. Well, there's enough revenues to sustain it. I compared that to the revenues that existed in 2020 for things like PCs, internet subscriptions. People were spending money on e-commerce, big money, and they had to get a PC to get access to the internet.
Yeah.
And so that was proof that people really wanted the internet because they were spending all that money. In 2024 dollars, it's 1.5 trillion. Whereas you look at the AI software now, and it was about 5 billion last year, maybe it'll be 25 billion this year. You say, well, that's a big increase. But the problem is that people are not paying the full price of that software. The AI software companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, and so on, have set very low prices for their software, much more than they have to pay to the cloud producers. So every time you use AI software, and you access the cloud through that AI software, there's a bill being sent by the cloud providers to the AI software companies. And those costs are more than twice what you're paying. There's twice what the revenues are. And recently it's gotten worse because Anthropic finally realized that they were losing so much money really based on a few users because they had this unlimited usage model or subscription plan where you could use it as much as you want. And they found out that some people were incurring tens of thousands of dollars of cloud costs for a $200 a month service. So it's the tens of thousands of dollars that Anthropic had to pay the cloud providers just to have this $200 a month subscriber. Obviously, that's ridiculous. But the same thing or similar things are going on with all the software companies, from OpenAI to the rest of these companies. And so this isn't sustainable. This didn't exist in the dot-com bubble. There was, you had to pay the full subscription price for your internet subscription. You had to pay the full price to Amazon to buy stuff in e-commerce. You had to pay the full price for the PC. There was no subsidies going on there. Yeah, there were a lot of overvalued companies, mostly big companies like Nokia and these companies. It wasn't, they called it a dot-com bubble, but it really wasn't the dot-com bubble. It was a bubble of all of these big infrastructure companies, but also, any company that was a phone provider, a computer provider. And so they really aren't comparable. This bubble is far worse than the dot-com bubble.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I speak from experience as an entrepreneur involved in AI for almost 25 years now. And I tell people, I think I even made a video on this on TikTok like a few years ago, that AI is expensive. And one of the reasons why, I'm not sure I even said this publicly, but one of the reasons that I never been involved in consumer AI, because the arguments that I had with my investors in my previous companies, is that there's not enough money. We will never be able to pay for the cloud infrastructure if we use users. We have to go for the enterprise. That's why I was never involved in consumer AI. It's always for me been B2B. For two key reasons. The one key reason for me, and I talk about this on LinkedIn a lot, is that I just don't believe AI is safe enough for the public use yet. Right? We're nowhere near that, and we're seeing the evidence of that already, unfortunately. But the second reason is that we need to have the ability to pay the bills, which granted, right now is cheaper the way compared to what it was, say, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we had to spend, we're at the seed level. We spent over $1 million just to build a basic server. And it was a crazy concoction because we didn't have the sort of infrastructure that we have with Azure or AWS that where you can just, connect your connect an API to an AI model of your choice. We didn't have that luxury. We had to literally build everything from scratch. So a basic server cost us over $1 million just to build that tiny thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's no way in hell we could get any consumers to cover that.
Yeah.
And this is why I don't understand, because a lot of the people involved in the current AI bubble, they know this. I mean, and you mentioned Anthropic. They know this. I mean, surely nobody can come out of that company and say, well, no, we didn't realize it would be that expensive. No, that's impossible. I would call out the bullshit here. It's no way that you did not know this, but they went ahead anyway. Why is that?
Well, they're trying to get people to use AI, and then they think that, well, then they're going to be trapped. They're going to have to use it. And the second thing is the costs are going to come down and the performance is going to go up. And GPT-5 proved that performance isn't going up. Costs, it's harder to say. I mean, token costs are going down, but nowhere near as fast as they do. And so I agree with you that you really can't base it on a consumer service. There are some consumers who are smart enough to discern. I mean, I know a lot of consumers, because there are PhDs and stuff using it who they're pretty intelligent. They have a lot of common sense, and they know when to reject an argument and when to accept it. But of course, a lot of people aren't. There's all these people that are getting trapped emotionally in it. They're believing anything there is, and some of those people who must not be that smart are pretty rich. I mean, there's the co-founder of Uber, who started claiming that he was doing vibe physics. And he's never studied physics in his life, never been involved with physics, and there he was thinking that he was pushing the boundaries of physics. And so there's a lot of these people who just buy into anything. So there's going to be problems, right? You have to, I mean, there's an old approach that people used to talk about when I was young and that I have adopted, and that's you look for the people who have a big willingness to pay. Or who will accept low performance, but generally who have a big willingness to pay. You find those people. No, you don't just look for everybody and think, I get this. I taught for years and students would say, well, the customer's everybody. Well, no, you got to find the first one. You got to find the second one. You got to find the third one. And I don't think Sam Altman understands that. He wrote this article, Moore's Law for Everything. He's completely oblivious to how companies have reduced the cost of transistor, LEDs, all these other things. I wrote a paper on it about what's the source of exponential improvements 10 years ago. I mean, these types of things. People don't have that common sense now. They did when I was young. I mean, I remember my physics professors. I have a physics undergraduate degree and a PhD in engineering from Carnegie Mellon. My physics degree, I remember teachers talking about different technologies. They weren't business professors, but they had a lot of common sense. And unfortunately, professors today, they're so narrow-minded. They're so focused on publishing their papers. So basically what they know is this, but they want to talk about this.
Yeah.
And as a result, a lot of the people who study there, they get crazy notions. They get a college degree and they, wow, I really know this topic. Well, I took a course on innovation. I'm really an expert on it. They don't even know it, right? They don't know the history. I've read 50 books on the history of a technology, so many. That's where you really find the insights into how technology improves.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And it actually reminded me of a conversation I had with my friend, Professor Jeremy Leaves, who's a mathematician, and he made a point that there's this narcissism in academia right now amongst the very smart people. So people who are really, really smart at mathematics or physics, and they get this delusion that because they're so smart in that, they're smart in everything, which of course they're not. And I have to say, I've experienced that, when I was in Google Campus London. I mean, Google did this amazing thing that it brought the best minds in one place. DeepMind was part of it before they were big. Nobody knew who DeepMind were. Nobody cared. But we were all ambitious entrepreneurs in the world of AI, and Google just wanted to bring the best people in one place. And I have to tell you, the level of narcissism there was crazy. I mean, I thought I was bad at the time, but I was humbled when I just saw that, they had this sort of God's complex almost. Not everybody, of course, I have to say that. But but it's definitely there. It's like they have this thought, this idea in their minds that, oh, it's like a sense of entitlement, right? It's like, oh, I'm so clever. Oh, I've got a PhD in this, therefore I know everything. But you don't. You actually, like, you take them out of physics, they are absolute idiots.
Well,
Using
I got my bachelor's in
absolutely
physics.
idiotic.
Bachelor's in physics, and I got straight A's in math. That's
Yes.
what I knew, math and
Yeah.
physics. I didn't have much common sense. I wasn't the kind of guy who was paying attention to a lot of stuff out of the classroom. And I remember my senior year, I decided I was going to get a professional engineer kind of, pass the exam for it.
Mhm.
So I went in there, and most of the stuff I understood, but there was a few things. I remember strength of materials. I didn't understand it. I realized that my knowledge of the world was very limited to what I learned in the classroom. Then I went to work in a semiconductor factory. And, I thought that all the stuff I'd be doing would be similar to all the exams I'd taken. And I thought, well, isn't that why they're teaching us all this stuff? Because this is what we do on the road? Nothing. It was all kind of like an art. And I remember my big contribution was that we were making this chip and it didn't work. And people were saying around me, the design's bad, because we were all involved with in the factory. Design bad. But I was looking at the chips, because you do the inspections, and I realized there was a lot of defects. So I went and counted them all and proved that just from manufacturing defects, we wouldn't be able to make a single one, that it was highly likely. So we made some changes. I babied some product through. We made some. They worked. The chips worked. And, I thought the designer was going to be all thanking me. He never did. But a lot of people were impressed. But none of that had to do with any physics. It was just kind of like common sense that I see these errors. And therefore, if I do some simple statistics with it, they call them masking steps. And there were like 12 at the time. And I said, okay, if I'm getting only 10% yield on 12 masking steps, 0.1 to the 12th power is going to be a very tiny number. And so this are the kinds of things that, people need to learn. And a lot of people don't. They think because they know all this math and physics that they know everything, and they don't. And this is the case with Sam Altman, because Sam Altman doesn't understand work.
Mm.
I did my PhD on the economics of robots. So I got very interested in work. What is work? What do they do? Well, I was kind of just looking at assembly robots. But, that's not all the work. There's all kinds of jobs in the world. And I remember reading so many books, about work and asking people what they did in the job, trying to figure out how jobs work. Sam Altman doesn't understand that. And most of these AI guys don't. They haven't really attempted to understand. They haven't hired people. The marketing people are terrible. That's why they keep making these ridiculous statements and not targeting real work. You got to find the work that's easiest to do with AI. Now, some AI people understand this. There's a lot of people on LinkedIn who have a good knowledge of AI, and they're usually saying, hey, in predictive AI, these things will work. They solve problems. But the problem is that Altman is talking about how ChatGPT can do all your emails, do all this stuff. But all this writing, even the image production, the video production, it's a small part of what work is.
Mm.
Most work, making cars, making semiconductors, doing healthcare, it doesn't involve writing emails or writing reports. Those emails and reports are only useful if they say something that helps the company make better cars, make better chips, or something like that. That's a very simple argument that 50 years ago, everybody would have said, well, we already know that, Jeff, don't tell us. But I'll tell you right now, most people don't. You don't see articles talking about, what work really is and why writing emails isn't going to, writing these documents. It doesn't help you, except in a small number of industries, right? Writing books, making movies, making video advertisements. So in some areas, there's a lot of potential, but for most of the economy, isn't even close.
And that's why, many of us say that AI empowers you as a worker, but it doesn't replace workers. I mean, that is a huge difference. And as you said, I think you made a great point that they don't understand jobs. They think in their heads that that jobs involve, oh, if you're a lawyer, okay, we'll replace you. Yeah, but do you know what lawyers actually do? Do you know their day-to-day work? They're not just lawyering.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, you're absolutely right. But to be honest with you, I speak from my direct experience. The media are, I tend to blame the media for a lot of things these days, but I wonder if the media are the key reason, not the only one, but because they really they've been treating just tech entrepreneurs as superstars. It does get into your head. I've had that, like when again with Google Campus, like we had the media, like I was interviewed, and it was like, it kind of makes you feel good. It's like, yeah, look at me, I'm on top of the world or whatever. And I kind of, again, going back to the narcissism point, it's like it kind of feeds into your narcissism more and more and more, and to an extent, you become delusional. You start believing your own hype. In a sense, so I think the media, they're being absolutely disastrous, because going back to the point that you made about revenue, again, I think 10 years ago, people would talk about how much money a tech startup is making, right? What's your revenue? What's your profit margins and stuff. But right now, all they talk about is valuation. Which is fake valuation, by the way. Like I always tell people, any investor can put money into your company and say, okay, I value you for $1 billion. That's your valuation. It's not based on sales, but this is all they talk about. And they even talk about, a company just raised, I don't know how many squillions of dollars from a VC, as if it's a success. I'm like, no, it's like saying, hey, look at me, I'm so successful, I got a big credit card.
Well, as being a professor for so long, so I used to, as being a professor for so many years, so many decades, I used to spend a lot of time looking, because I was very interested in history of technology. So I would look at, firms from a long time ago and look at what was being said in the business press. And 40 years ago, articles were that was the first thing they mentioned. Do you have profits? No. Yes. The company doesn't have profits. Company announced it wasn't profitable this quarter. The share price plummeted, and it's probably going to go out of business or have to be acquired. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go on that way. You look at 1980. Forget his name. He's a professor at University of Florida. He found that in 1980, 80% of the companies doing an IPO were profitable in the previous year. Mm-hmm. Whereas now it's like 10%, 15%. And even the unicorns who've been around for 10, 15 years, they're only 10 or 15% are profitable. Mm-hmm. We kind of, something changed after the dot-com bubble burst, or maybe after the Great Recession of 2008, is that VC started funding startups for very long periods of time. They didn't get profitable, so they couldn't do an IPO. People thought those IPO windows were closed, so they just kept funding them, and by doing that, they just increased the valuation. And the media bought into this argument, as you're saying, that was important, that somehow we valued them. We're valuing OpenAI at $500 billion, and somehow that number is relevant. It isn't. It doesn't. All it's based on is their opinion. And what are they trying to do? They're going to have these high valuations so that when it does do an IPO, all these retail investors are going to think it's worth $500 billion. I got to buy it. I got to buy some shares right now.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. There's nobody, very few people who have common sense are applying common sense to their decisions right now.
And the danger is this is basically a meme coin type situation. It's like pump and dump. If OpenAI goes public, I do believe there will be a point they will have to go public, because who else is going to fund them? They literally sucking up cash from everyone, and I think there's no cash left. So I believe they might go. They would be IPO'd. But I wonder if there's going to be a rug pull after that, because effectively it's pump and dump. That's all what the markets have turned into these days.
Yeah. Well, it's just a very long pump phase. They've been pumping for 2 or 3 years now, and they're going to keep pumping, and they're hoping that the IPO window opens. And given the amount of money that the VCs have now, because when I talk about this startup bubble bursting, the money that the VCs raised from investors went way down. And that enabled and that prevented them from investing much money in the startups. But then this generative AI hype created a lot more, gave the VCs a lot more money to then give out. That's kind of keeping them alive because many of them would have gone bankrupt if the generative AI wasn't produced. So it immediately makes me this suspicious guy that I am, that, well, they had to find something, right? And so they were all happy when Sam Altman was making all these big pronouncements, because they were worried they're going to go out of business. And you could find several articles that, and several VCs saying this, and they're in my book. It's and most of them are pretty quiet now. If you send them a private message, they'll say, well, yeah, I agree. But, they don't want to say anything publicly because they don't want to lose everything. So you're right, the pump and dump. And although I guess that the dump has occurred with the next funding round. So like OpenAI, the original investors, most of them aren't there now. They sold out in the secondary markets. So there has been some dumps. It's just not the big dump of companies going public.
Yeah. So going back to your book, because you've been involved in tech. I mean, I part of my hope with this discussion that it will be kind of a bit of a therapy for me, because I still see myself as an AI noob, even though I've been involved in it for a long time. But you've been involved in it for a very, very long time. Hence your book. So you've seen you were at the right time in the right place for every single bubble that happens for several decades. So can you tell us your story? How did it all start? Because I think that could set a good foundation for us to start looking into the future, which I think is a bleak future. But let's start with the fun stuff. Basically, your journey. Where did it all start that led you to where you are today?
I was a hypester when I was very young. I mean, when America landed on the moon in 1969, whoa, I was excited. And, Star Trek came out, and I was big on everything. I thought it was all going to happen. And, I stayed pretty optimistic. I suppose in the 80s and 90s, I began to say, well, most of the stuff we see happening is Moore's Law related in the 2000s. And then in the 2000s, there was a lot of hype about nanotechnology and superconductors and a long list of these things. And I started teaching this course on the economics of new technology in 2008 at National University of Singapore. Very popular course. I mean, I had 100 students, more than 100 students in the two classes that were offered each year. It was the most popular course in my program. And we talked about all this. And I was kind of optimistic. But then about in 2012, I realized that a lot of the technologies weren't getting that much better, particularly superconductors, Theranos of the bioelectronics, Theranos kind of, nanotechnology, all these carbon nanotubes and stuff. Because I was monitoring all the performance that was being performance figures that were released in academic papers and things. And I realized, wait, this isn't, so it's just going to be limited. It's more limited. Then I started to learn about startups losing so much money. That was like 2016, 2017. So by the late 2010s, I realized that it was all a bunch of baloney. I mean, I started publishing data on the startup losses around 2010. LinkedIn, otherwise, a whole bunch of articles in American Affairs, 3 articles on 2019, 2021, I think 2023, just on how there's so many losses. And I was looking at market capitalization. I realized, I went back and I looked at how long it took all the top startups to become profitable and to become members of the top 100 market capitalization in the world. So that's what I focused on, starting with, with Microsoft and these other companies, and now and Google, and they were all getting profitable within 10 years, and many within 5 years. There was just a few rare ones that didn't get profitable until year 10, which one is Amazon, but also Qualcomm and a lot of biotech firms. Yeah. And then I looked at the startups that have been founded, since 2005. I think I used the term unicorns if they were labeled as a unicorn. But since then, I've just kind of stick to, if you look at startups that were founded after 2005, there's only one in the top 100 market capitalization. That is Uber. Moderna was there, but fell out, right? Nobody buys vaccines anymore. Zoom was Zoom was doing well. I don't know if it was top 100, but it's since not doing that well. DoorDash is close as like 150 or something, I think. So really, the startup system has not produced anything that great. And you say, well, but Uber's so great. Well, the reason why Uber became profitable is because it was able to raise prices. I forget what year. And the reason why I was able to raise prices is that during the lockdown, all these public transportation companies went out of, were cut back. A lot of bus services, particularly, but even train services. And so when people went back to work, how are they going to get to work? Well, public transportation was gone. They had to pay for Uber. They had to use an Uber or a Lyft or something like that. And what did Uber do? Well, it raised prices. Why not? You raise prices.
Take advantage, yeah.
Yeah, take advantage of the situation. But, if you look at the startups founded in the late 20th century, or even early 21st century, they didn't raise prices. They reduced prices. They were commercializing technologies that got cheaper, right? Cars and roads don't get cheaper, right? People forget about the road aspect of Uber. Those roads are valuable pieces of property that somebody has to keep and maintain. They don't get cheaper; they get more expensive. So the startups founded since 2005, they're not that good. It's terrible. But people are willing to buy the narrative that these tech companies have produced, that they're so great. We're living in the greatest time ever. And of course we're not. Of course, the American people don't think so. And people in other countries. That's why they elected Trump, because things aren't going well. Right? So, I think that, so a lot of my views changed 10, 15 years ago from teaching this course, and then starting to notice that a lot of the narrative has changed. And when I say the narrative, I mean the metrics have changed. Like when I was, 25 years ago, people talk about fusion in terms of something called the triple product, in terms of these three metrics were going up. They stopped going up. So they stopped using the metric. Now, people talk about fusion. They don't talk about these metrics. They just say, oh my gosh, so-and-so firm just got $800 million. It's going to bring it closer to commercialization.
Yeah.
How can we say it's close to commercialization if we cannot demonstrate any measurable progress in a relevant metric? The tech companies don't talk about it. And the media don't ask questions about this because they don't know. And the professors, you see, the problem is the professors are in on this too. The professors, they, like I said before, they know this and they're asked to talk about this. They don't know bigger things. If you look at the, Ethan Mollick and Tyler Cohen and these guys, they don't ever talk about some academic model of how innovation occurs and how markets grow and how then the stock market grows. They don't talk about that because there are no models. I mean, I spent all my career trying to create these models and proposing them. So I wrote a book back in 2013. Now I'm forgetting the name of it, but it was very academic, looking at all these, how industries form and things. But none of these people pay attention to it. And you would think that somebody would ask these guys, oh, you academics are experts on this. So can you tell us what model you're using, what academic paper you're basing this on?
Yeah.
They don't have anything. Ethan Mollick just says individuals need to think about how AI can apply to their job. He doesn't talk about the fact that people are involved with processes, right? You have to talk about how people's work is coordinated, because you can't just have everybody sending emails to each other that somebody else has to read. So maybe you become more productive writing emails, but they don't become any productive about, incorporating those ideas in some kind of better business. So academics are involved with this hype too. The business schools are selling these courses on AI and making a lot of money on it. The consulting companies are doing consulting, making big money on it. But none of those users of AI are making money off of it. And none of those software providers are making money out of it.
Okay, guys, I need a very big favor from you. If you are watching on YouTube, please make sure you hit the subscribe button because that makes a massive difference for our podcast. It literally costs you nothing other than a split-second click. But if you're also watching or listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure that you give us a follow there. But in order for it to count, you also need to leave us a review. Please feel free to give us whatever review you think that it's fair, but it's important that you do because otherwise they don't count your following. Why? I have no idea, but that's just how it is. But it costs you 3 seconds to do that. So I'll really, really appreciate it if you do that. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the episode. And the business community as well that invested in AI as the customers of AI. Now they're finding out the hard way that all of their AI is failing. And I mean, I talk to companies like that. I've been actually warning about this for gazillions of years. You know, that there's, I think during the pandemic, I'm sure there was another study from MIT. Was it MIT or Harvard? There was one of them that they were saying that 9 out of 10 AI projects were failing at the time. That was, that was over 5 years ago. So that's before Gen AI hype. So effectively now they say, well, actually it's 95% failure rate, which is like, so
we've gotten worse. Yeah. It's, there's been problems with AI and all these technologies for a very long time. And these things get suppressed and, people don't read them. I mean, I just read the MIT recent report about the 95% figure. And, the hard thing about doing these kinds of studies is that there are so many industries, and within each industry, so many applications. So they want to draw conclusions about, why a 5% succeeded or something. It's impossible because they're all different. And you see, what they should have been telling us is it's not the way the company implemented. It's which applications it works best for.
Yeah.
That's what people have been ignoring. That's what you want to find. Where is the applications? And we used to use the term killer applications. Here's the great application that drove, like book buying drove the initial demand for Amazon. And then it went to other things, it went to electronics, music, went to other things. But people don't focus on that anymore. The business schools kind of all focus on, well, it's the way you do it. It isn't, it doesn't involve the technology application. It's the way you do it, which is wrong. It's very much you want to understand those applications. But the MIT study, it doesn't really tell you that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the why, like my co-founder, Simon, he always he's a designer, but also behavioral expert. So he's the one who always tries to remind me, Tim, it's always about the why question. Why would anybody want this application? I mean, this is how we started to push this whole idea of verticalized AI. Because in fact, funnily enough, at the time of the recording of this episode, like there's an article that came out, I think on Quartz, which I will publish on LinkedIn, where they were talking about something along the lines that, apparently old AI works better than the new AI. Now, I was laughing when I was reading it because I was like, first, there is no old or new. It's the same AI that's been around for a very long time. But the main reason the so-called old AI worked, because old AI was always about, as you said, you verticalize it. So you look at a very particular specific problem and you build an AI model around that.
Yeah.
This is how AI worked for a very, very long time. Obviously, I don't need to tell you that, but I was just telling the listeners that AI, and this is how I piss off some of my counterparts, because I've been saying all along, AI is an accessory. I think the problem that they're trying to do now, and they've been trying to do this for years. I mean, ever since the whole concept of AGI came out in 2002, I think, by Ben Goertzel, I believe. And basically there was this obsession that they want AI to be the foundation of something, but it can't be a foundation of anything because that's not how it works. And every time you try, it messes up the way we see it right now, with very dangerous consequences as well, especially if you're trying to pull vulnerable people into it psychologically. I mean, we're seeing all these horrific stories of, teenagers harming themselves and ending their own lives, etc. I mean, it's a dangerous thing that all of us have been warning about for years and years and years. And it's because AI does not work that way. And as you said, and I agree with you, like, where are the academics? Some academics are speaking out, actually. I mean, again, they're in the shadows for some reason. That's why I've got this podcast. I want to get them out of the shadows because nobody else wants to talk to them. I guess they're not clickbaity enough.
Yeah. Well, that's an important point you made, or many important points. But one is that predictive AI works better than generative AI. There's a lot of successful applications.
Yes.
But I remember the hype about predictive AI 10 years ago.
Yeah.
There was, I used to go to this gym, and there'd would be this show about how AI was going to replace all the doctors and lawyers, and everyone's going to go, out of business. And now we got the same kind of ads, right? But now it's for generative AI. Well, predictive AI didn't do it, but generative AI is going to do it. And so there was a lot of hype. I remember believing in it because IBM, they won Jeopardy and they said they were going to revolutionize medicine. I thought, okay. And people were saying this, okay, well, maybe. And then about 2014, Wall Street Journal releases this report, this analysis of what's going on at the Anderson Center for Medicine, someplace in Texas. I don't remember where. It was a failure, and it just all fell apart. And that was when I started to become suspicious about AI, because then I realized that I also started to think, well, why did they try to replace all AI medicine all at once? Mm-hmm. Why don't they choose some specific things and make it work there and then move up? Start small and then move big. And this has been a problem with these AI companies forever. For the last 15 years, is that they're always aiming so high and making these big pronouncements. And, you should be suspicious of anybody who makes these big pronouncements. Require them to show you a success story. Don't talk about what's going to happen in the future, because that's what most of these articles will be. You'll see an article that says AI is really doing well. And then you'll read the article, and isn't in the article. It's all will do, can do. And years. We've been incurring this for years. It's like, more people should stop and say, well, maybe it will do, but maybe that will take 50 years. In the meantime, tell us what it is doing. And I want to add something here, because there's a guy on LinkedIn who actually is not that big of a hypester, but we got in this kind of discussion about breakthroughs. What I've been saying for a long time is breakthroughs are rare. They're very rare. And I've even gone through and read, I read a book called Breakthrough. It was an excellent book on the biotech industry. And every drug they talk about that they developed had 10 breakthroughs. Yeah. Because there's 10 little things they have to do that were unexpected that caused the drug. And then the drug, usually what it did is it gave you 6 months longer lifespan from cancer. Okay, now 6 months is nice. I've reached stage now where, I want 6 more months, and then I want another 6 more months. But to be really meaningful, you're going to take 10 breakthroughs. So now you're really getting 100 breakthroughs to give you, 7 more years of life. Okay. So people misuse this term breakthrough. But this particular AI guy, I said, okay, how do you define a breakthrough in AI? I said, here's some candidates. I gave a number of them, including the Nobel Prize, Nobel Prizes for that. He said, none of those are Nobel breakthroughs. But what I'm working on is a breakthrough. And I realized, oh my gosh, this is the way a lot of people think. They think that, well, no one's doing anything good, but I am. And when it works out, I'm going to save the world. Yeah. And, it's okay if people think that. Obviously, if you really want to do something good, you have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to aim for something no one's doing. But as you mentioned before, don't believe your own propaganda. I think it's great that you have confidence in this particular thing, and you're working on it, and you're doing something different. Great. That's all great. But don't stop for a second and say, hey, these breakthroughs are easy. I'm going to do it. Anybody who tells me it's hard, no, I tell them I'm going to do it. Because they're hard, they're rare. And so if you're funding companies, you better be careful what they're promising, because these things are rare. Things like the transistor, the first few LEDs, these are rare. A guy who won a Nobel Prize for LEDs didn't even develop the first LED. He developed the first blue LED. That was after all these other LEDs had been done. You have to realize that The blue LED is just a slightly different LED than the ones before it. It doesn't take much to be really hard, and thus somebody gets an award if they do it. But so don't be thinking that it's easy and that, I'm going to promise all these things.
Yeah. Well, it's what I like to describe the Hollywoodification of innovation, right? It's just this Hollywood fantasy. And you see even Elon Musk, I know, he gets a lot of flack. I'm not a fan by any means, but he started doing a lot of, comparing AI, that he wants R2D2 and all of these things, because that's what people understand, like the general public. I'll never forget, because I started, every time, like when I kind of started to burn bridges with the VC world and all of that stuff and set up my current company, that was like in 2019. I was making most, like, going to speeches and sort of doing presentations about the hype of AI. But basically what I always started all of my presentations where I wanted to ask the audience, when you see the acronym AI, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And I would say 99% of the time, people would say Terminator, people would say, R2D2, all this Hollywood stuff, right?
Yeah.
Now, fast forward a few years, when I ask the same question today, they say it's ChatGPT, which is, okay, I suppose it's progress because at least it's real. However, it's like, what frustrates me, because the mission of my company is that, because by that point, we already could see very clearly that there was a major misunderstanding of what AI can and can't do. And the vast majority, again, because I was focusing on business to business, businesses believed AI can do the things that it can't actually do. So I wanted to basically if there's a term, like, to de-Hollywoodify people's minds of AI, show them, okay, look, this is not what AI can do. Yeah. This is the reality. Unfortunately, it's not sexy. It's boring. It's not very Hollywood, but that's the fact, whether you like it or not. And I have to say, Elon Musk was kind of doing the same, because being part of the Google ecosystem, Google were the only company, in my opinion, that were doing AI properly. From the point of view that they weren't really hyping it up, it was a bit hidden. DeepMind were...
Yeah, DeepMind, yeah.
They were doing... I would say all of us at Google campus, we were all focusing on real problems. So I say this a lot on the podcast as a reminder that everybody had the mission. Like, for me, we wanted to use AI to fight misinformation in science and science publications, right? DeepMind were, of course, work, I think, was molecular biology or material science. I can't remember. It was something to do with molecular visualization.
Yeah, both. They did both, yeah.
Yeah. And there are loads of startups that were focusing on enhancing cybersecurity, online safety. It's real stuff. Nobody was going on about AGI and we want to replace doctors and all that nonsense, right? But I have been to a lot of events at the time where we had, startup founders that were quite hyperbolic about their promises. That I cannot tell you how many times, Jeff, I heard people say things like, "Oh, my company will kill Google," or "My company will kill Meta," or Facebook at the time. Yeah. I'm like, come on, guys, don't do that. Yeah. But Google, actually, they deployed AI in the right way over the years, which is the reason why they've been the dominant force in AI. Every AI that you see today, actually, I would argue, is thanks to Google. I mean, they brought it out there. It's not necessarily theirs, but they're the ones that pushed it out. And when Elon Musk and Sam Altman, even though it was Sam Altman, when they founded OpenAI, I genuinely was very optimistic about that, because what they were saying about OpenAI at the time, the fact that it was non-profit, it's open, etc., it's to counter Google's dominance. And I thought, okay, I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. But of course, look where we are. I mean, they are the ones now. They are the very people who basically said the right things then. Now are the ones that are trying to Hollywoodify AI again.
Yeah. Let's go back to Hollywood, because Hollywood is a big reason for the excessive hype.
Of course. Yeah.
There are very few movies, and science fiction, it's not just Hollywood, very few movies that actually present a credible view of the future. I mean, like Star Wars, they've got humans, driving these little rockets when they're able to go faster than the speed of light. I mean, we had AI back in the 70s. Why would you think that people would still be driving these rockets? Well, they're not. They wouldn't be. There's no real attempt to present any kind of credible argument because they know that most people don't care. Most people just kind of believe all this. But you see, I was interested in this stuff from a very young age. I was always looking at it, and I find very few even descriptions of why something can be done. I mean, you see it in Iron Man, which I like. They have some design kind of scenes in there that I showed my son, and he's working in the lab, and that's a better understanding. They present a better understanding of how these scientists and engineers work.
Yeah.
But a lot of kids, they grow up on this stuff. Even engineers and scientists, they see this stuff and they think that's the way it is. They think it works. They think that, well, it was in the movie, so it's going to be in the future. It's useless, and science fiction is also this way. I mean, I've read so many science fiction books where they don't even make an attempt to kind of describe the logic behind some new design. They don't say, well, here's the theories of physics, and if you just this and this, people think that this might be possible. They don't go into that. All of that's avoided. It's just a bunch of computer graphics and things, and so kids, they don't grow up on this. They don't. For me, MIT should have a course, or maybe it should be mentioned in all courses, on why these things in Hollywood can never work. Why do we think the Iron Man suit could work? I mean, it's so simple to say why it can't work, right? How do all those things fly together?
Yeah.
Do they have a big magnet? They would then be so strong they'd be pulling all this other crap together. Does it have a programmable magnet? I mean, I don't know all the ways that it could be done, but there are no, that might be if you actually made advances in physics, but there's no existing theory that says that can be done. And most of the science fictions are based on things for which no credible theory exists. And universities, they don't attempt to address these issues. I mean, I did in my class, but you got to be better than, you would have to have a much more advanced knowledge of physics than I had. I had a bachelor's, but for all these advanced theories, I don't know. But universities are failing because they're so narrow. They keep focusing on this narrow stuff, and they want to tell you this theory, that theory. They want to step back and say, why are people investing so much money in these different technologies? What could possibly happen that is going to enable these things to work?
Yeah.
Right. And then they're saying, well, that's for the business investors. Well, the business investors don't know. You got to address this issue. We need people that can talk about this because they don't talk about it. It's a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's a vacuum. So what comes in?
It's a vacuum. Anybody can just say whatever.
Exactly. Everybody can say whatever they want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they do. And they get funded. And MIT says, no, that's not the way we teach. We're not going to talk about that because we don't know.
But is that because I mentioned Jeremy earlier, and in fact, because I used to work closely with I still do work with academics, but some of the best mathematicians, like people, even including people that help me understand maths. Jeremy is one of them, but even one of his colleagues, his name is Professor Alexander Gorban. These mathematicians, I found them so remarkable because they knew everything, and I'm talking about outside maths. For example, my background mostly is in biomedical science. That's my thing. That's why, when I hear people going about, AI can replace doctors and therapists, I just laugh. I was like, okay, you guys haven't got a clue how this thing works, obviously. But these guys, they knew so much about biotech, and I was like, is your background in biotech? How do you know that? They're like, oh, no. We just wanted to understand how things work so that we can understand how do we apply mathematics in the most accurate way within these applications and so on. So these guys, and that's well over 10 years ago. I mean, these guys, where
Yeah.
the key reason why my mindset has kind of changed at the time, because to be fair to myself, I wasn't as bad as the other tech bros, but I was not. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
definitely better now, but at the time, I was kind of pushing the hype a little bit myself.
Yeah.
I did believe, like yourself, I kind of believed in a lot of these things. I honestly did believe that technology can make the world a better place. But I never kind of asked, what does that even mean, right? I was like, I wanted to get into nanotechnology as well. I was going all of these things, but I was very fortunate that, you know, I surrounded myself with people billion times smarter than me,
Yeah.
and they're smart because they had that ability to know what goes on in other areas around them.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why I could get to Google campus, because I think I was the only biomedical scientist in the whole thing. Everybody was like an engineer or mathematician, and there was me, right?
Yeah.
But it allowed me to see a different perspective. And that's why I argue with a lot of people all the time, because everybody that goes on about, you know, we want to push AI to do this and this and that. And I'm like, what's your background? Oh, I'm an engineer. Well, how do you know what nurses wanted? How do you know what lawyers want? Have you spoken to lawyers? No. But they make assumptions rather than actually truly informing themselves.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting that you mentioned universities, because one of the criticisms that I have, I criticize the media, but I also criticize the education system, mostly at the school level. That I feel that schools need to kind of teach kids how the real world works. But from everything that you've highlighted, it seems that universities are part of the problem too. And you would think universities, you know, this is the first step towards your professional career. Surely they should be the ones that kind of open your eyes to reality, right? To say, look, this is not how things work. For Iron Man, it's cool, but it's not real. This is the reality. But they're not doing it.
Focused on testing. Testing is the worst thing in the world, you know, because once you start this road down testing, you then teach the test. I mean, my son gets tons of that. Singapore's terrible.
I hate
teaching to the test.
I hate tests. Yeah.
You want to have kids learn what's out there in the world. I agree with you. You said learn how the world works, learn how banks work, learn how biotech companies work, and not about the money. Just talk about what these people do, and talk about these theories. You don't have to discuss it in different. You have to talk about kind of how does the sun work, or magnetism works. Or, how does an engine work versus a motor, right? Most people don't even know they're different. A motor is electricity driving the movement, and the engine is some kind of fuel making it move. You don't have to go into a lot of detail, but you want to give kids an overview of what's going on in the world so that they're thinking, so that when they're walking down the street, they're thinking about, well, I wonder, that car works that way. Yeah. Why does a rocket work differently? And you want them to be wondering, because then they'll be thinking. If you don't have them wondering, they won't be thinking.
Yeah.
And these exams, they turn off students. You got to repeat this. And in Singapore tests, there's a certain answer they're looking for. They want to see a certain answer in the words.
Yeah.
You can give a credible response, and they will say 0. It's got to be the exact words, right? And you can't have a system where there is a right answer, because in most cases there is not.
Yeah.
But I want to mention a scientist who understands this stuff far better than most people. I mean, in my field, in management of technology and these economists and social science just have no idea how this works. And so they're just talking about, they talk about innovation, they talk about
potential,
get more patents. And we're getting more patents, so we must be innovating. And you know what? A lot of those patents are based on papers, because we the papers mentioned in the patents. And then they just do all kinds of studies on this. And you try to ask them, well, what science-based technology has come out? How many have come out in the last 10, 20 years? Well, I don't know, but I see in my study that there's a whole lot of science in those patents, right? There's no discussion of, well, there isn't very many, maybe solar cells, lithium-ion batteries for vehicles, OLEDs. There's a few. Why is there so few? And they have they don't even address this. They just keep doing their statistics. See, a lot of professors do not know their subject matter. they know statistics because that's the way you get published. And that's the only thing that matters is to get published.
Because
But
that's
there's
how you
this
get funded.
guy. Yeah, and to get funding, this guy at Princeton and computer scientist. I'm not going to pronounce his name, Narayan or something. It's a long Indian name. And he wrote AI Snake Oil. So he not only is a great computer scientist, he understands all these problems with AI, but he also wrote this paper recently on why he doesn't think AI will help science. And in that article, he demonstrated, a great understanding of how science really works, about how you really need to have to change the way you think, or change the model completely. You can't just be, AI is likely to just tell you what everybody else is thinking, as opposed to, well, you're trying to get rid of that. You're trying to think a different way. You're trying to figure out where is the current scientific theory wrong, or could it be wrong? Where are the contradictions? He's the first scientist that I've seen doing that. And he demonstrated a better understanding of how science works than all these social scientists I deal with. And so there are some people like this still around, but you're right. They're too rare. There's not enough of them.
Which is a problem. And it's like, actually, effectively, you demonstrate with the testing and the examination idea. It's like a box ticking exercise. It's like everything that everybody's doing is just based on box ticking rather than asking questions. Actually, this reminds me of a conversation I had with the philosopher Pia Lauritsen, Dr. Pia Lauritsen. She was specializing in the power of asking questions, and she was saying to me that to her, the problem that we have today as humanity is that we're not asking questions anymore. And her fear is that with AI, as you said as well, she said something very similar, that AI should allow us to ask more questions and scrutinize more. But what we're seeing right now is the exact opposite, because we're simply, AI just gives us the answers that we already know. So without realizing it, we're suppressing our ability to ask questions, therefore, even to be human. Because that's what humanity is, isn't it? It's about us asking the difficult questions, to scrutinize, so that way we can solve the problems that we're seeing.
Box ticking is a good characterization of what's going on. Another way to say that, there was a book called The Tyranny of Metrics 30 years ago that was just about how we've created all these metrics. These metrics didn't exist 50 years ago. Back when we were really developing good science back in the 1950s, the transistor and LEDs and lasers and nuclear power and polymers, and there's a whole long list. We didn't have this stuff. We didn't have all this. We didn't have very many journals. We didn't even have peer review then. We had editors who basically made the decision about whether a paper was going to be published. We don't, not only do not do that, I don't think there's any people that could be those editors anymore. They just, they don't have that knowledge. They spent their whole life publishing papers in a very narrow area, usually with, tons of PhD students, postdocs, and then they have to write letters of recommendation for all of them. Our top scientists, they're bureaucrats. They're not spending their time debating ideas. So the whole system is broken.
And unfortunately, we have politicians like Trump and certainly people like RFK Jr. taking full advantage of that right now. In fact, going back to the point that I made earlier, that it creates a vacuum that allows anybody just to come in and say whatever they like. I mean, now, my concern that I heard, again, at the time of this recording, that they're planning to announce in September, basically the US government's official position that they have found evidence that autism is caused by vaccines. One of the most debunked pseudosciences in medical science. Again, speaking from my background, they're actually officially going out there, they're going to do that now. They're actually going to go out there and say, yep, ladies and gentlemen, all the conspiracy theories were correct. Autism is caused by vaccines. That's the prediction. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. But this is what you're saying, isn't it? It's like this is that is leading us, like this leading the world into this very dangerous situation, a complete misinformation bubble now.
People are angry that economically they're not doing better than their parents. They're very angry. And so they're angry and they are willing to elect someone who talks about the problem, but doesn't understand it. So the Democratic Party in the US didn't talk about any of these problems. All they talked about was universities are great. They produce so much research, great research, and it all just ends up making our life better, which the common person knew wasn't going on. While the Republicans were saying, all you got to have is free markets and everything works fine. While all these monopolies were being formed, right? So you look at any industry and there were fewer producers than there were 50 years ago. And so both parties were off on drugs. So then in comes Trump. And he talks about the problem. He's not going to solve them because he doesn't have enough knowledge to solve them, but he's talking about them. So for many people, it's, well, at least he's talking about them. A lot of people elected Obama for the same reason, because he talked about problems, but then he never solved them. Now, Trump is going to solve them, but he's going to put out a bunch of crazy solutions that aren't going to work and probably make things worse. So, you know, for me, people tell me what I think of Trump, and I say I hate him, but, you know, I haven't liked the president since Bill Clinton. You know, the real issue is not, oh, we get rid of Trump and everything will be fine. No, it's why do we have such bad choices right now? Why has the quality of presidents gone down so far that now I look at Carter and Reagan and I say, wow, they were great. Because at least because they were smart, and they appointed a lot of smart people to positions of power. We don't have that anymore. Right? Because this is where it's come from, this Robert Kennedy guy who doesn't know anything about it. Why don't we have a doctor in there?
Yeah, because he's looking for loyalty, isn't he? He just, you know, you have to, it's like that, I don't know if you saw that cringe clip of the cabinet meeting that every single one of the member of the cabinet was sucking up to Trump, saying, Mr. President, you're such an amazing president. We love you. It was like so cringe. It was like, what the hell? This is, what kind of governance is this?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a concern to me, which I guess that's part of the bubble again, isn't it? Because as we talked about earlier, that his administration effectively empowered the tech bubble even further to an extent that now, because I tried to bring guests where I tried to understand what would the future what could the future look like now, which to me I think is going to be abysmal. Frankly, I want to be positive, but I just can't see it, because I'm thinking to myself, if the experts aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, politicians aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and people are trapped in that misinformation bubble, and of course we've got all this whole AI hype.
Well, when I was young,
I mean, what do you think?
Well, when I was young, I always got mad at people who assessed the quality of science and technology by looking at how much money was spent on R&D. A lot of people did. That's an input. You got to focus on an output. You got to come up with an output. And if that means you have to talk about which technologies have diffused and made a difference in our lives, do that. You don't need a number, right? There's this obsession with having numbers. They think, unless you have some numbers.
The metrics again.
Yeah, the metric. Yeah. No, you got to come. If you're using a bad metric, which oftentimes people use because there's nothing good, you're making a bigger mistake. So for years, this R&D spending, and it was terrible, now we have people looking at how much VC spending there is. Oh, they're spending look at all the money they're spending on VCs. Look at the valuations. These are inputs. What's coming out, right? And with AI now, they're not looking at what's coming out. They're looking at, well, we're going to have AGI. So the conversation is about these superficial kind of things. And if you really looked at improvements, well, there was a little talk on that, right? But it was all about how well AI scored on these tests. Well, people forgot that, well, wait a minute. We knew 40 years ago that tests are just kind of an average surrogate for proving, for assessing how well students are going to do in the workplace. And yet we went down that road. George Bush Jr. What was his? I forget the name of the program that wanted to assess these students. No Child Left Behind. We're going to assess all these students at a very young age.
What about that?
It just made education worse. It just pushed everybody to testing students, and they've got a problem. But there was no way to help them because we weren't doing it the right way. The really important thing is you need to excite students. You need to get students excited about science and doing experiments and things. And, there are going to be students who don't figure it out. Well, you can't sacrifice everybody by just saying, okay, we're going to test you all. And if you didn't score well on the test, then you're not going to move forward. Well, then everybody just became obsessed with the tests and, didn't try to get kids curious about them, didn't try to teach them. Who was the guy who was billions and billions of stars? Who was that professor 30, 40 years ago? He was one of the first people to talk about climate change. I
can't think of it.
He talked about these problems and about how you focus on these exams and all these simple metrics and the students lose interest. And now they're applying that to AI. They're saying, well, yeah, it scores higher in the tests. It's not that important.
Yeah. Well,
I learned that when I first started working in semiconductor manufacturing and realized that a lot of the stuff I'd studied just wasn't relevant. It was just, it wasn't irrelevant. It's just that there was a lot of other things that were important. We're missing all that. And so when we test an AI, see how well an AI does on a test and not all the other things that we know are important, we're missing all the important things. And then, of course, we know everybody's looking at it and say, well, yeah, they did better on the test because the tests were in the training data. And so we've had to spend all this time, trying to test these systems on things that aren't in training data yet, come up with new questions. But it's kind of all been a big waste of time. We've just spent so much time, the industry spent so much time trying to convince people that AI was getting better. And now we realize, well, it really wasn't. GPT-4 to GPT-5, GPT-5 is hardly better. The users are saying that. The people who are all excited about AI. It's not the skeptics like Gary Marcus and us. It's people who are really excited before. It's not getting better. And that was the wrong metric. See, the whole metric thing, what we wanted to do was to find these applications where it can be easily applied, and then look at how the revenues grow, and look at how productivity increases, maybe just at an industry level. But we don't do that.
Yeah.
And there are other studies. I mean, this METR did this study of software that got quoted a lot of, 3 or 4 months, 5 months ago, in which they compared, software engineers, the productivity of software engineers who had AI assistants and those who hadn't. And surprisingly, the ones with AI assistants didn't do as well as the ones who didn't have AI assistants. And because the sample size is small. So now they're supposedly doing it again. I see these reports that they're putting together more people, but you don't see anything coming out. This is a few weeks ago, and you'd think by now we would have heard it if it was successful, right?
Yeah.
This stuff is so hard, and they're making it try to sound so simple. And if you're going to use metrics, you better make sure that they're relevant. And unfortunately, the people who understand this usually aren't the people in power, because people in power want to see metrics. And the people who are selling the metrics certainly want to sell the metrics. They get power. So we got a lot of challenges here.
No, absolutely. Well, it goes back to the box ticking, isn't it? It's like the people in power, they want the box ticking because it's much easier to...
And they just look at how many boxes have been ticked.
Yeah.
We really need that? We need something to do that? Yeah.
And the point I make as well in terms of AI, if AI can replace something, say if it's a job or exams or tests or whatever, I always argue that means that thing was never designed for humans in the first place. That's if AI, because AI has no intelligence, right? So basically, if it has the ability to kind of to pass the test, then maybe we should not be testing humans, which kind of goes back to the point that you made, that it's about the creativity side. And just as a quick funny thing, because when I did my master's degree in IT and computer science, we actually had exams on coding. Yeah. Which even to me at the time, I'm like, what do you mean exams? As in do you want us to write a piece of software? It's like, oh, no, it's a written exam. I'm like, are you for real? It's like, is that how you assess a good programmer? Like you give me a piece of paper, you tell me, okay, is this if statement correct? Like, no, that's not how you do it. Like make me write a program. And if it works, then that means I'm a good programmer. If it doesn't work, I'm not a good programmer. This is how you test it. But and that's a master's level. I'm not talking about schools here. This is like MSc.
Yeah. Well, getting back to ChatGPT, the same problems exist. A lot of these academics, they would test people. They would get AI assisted, write a report, AI non-assisted, and they would assess what the quality of the report was. And they said, well, we can assess the quality of their business ideas because we're at University of Pennsylvania and we have produced so many startups. Therefore, we are an expert at assessing these kinds of written documents. And of course, what they didn't say is that most of them are losing money, even the unicorns. They're not experts at this. And if you're going to assess writing, you really have to assess whether there is an idea there that then leads to the company making more money, or something gets better. So that's hard. Most things that are written aren't going to achieve that. We're looking for rare events. In most of the cases in written documents that are being exchanged and being used to come up with ideas, we're looking for a rare event. We don't care if the average quality of the documents is high. We don't care about that. What we care about is, did one of a million emails have an idea that helped the company get better?
Yeah.
Right? That's the thing about innovation. You're looking for rare events. And so you can't apply all this kind of average, all this average writing's better. Let me give you a related example. My wife loves ChatGPT. And one time she showed me this letter of recommendation she wrote. Said, isn't this good? Because she's Singaporean. She has terrible grammar and stuff. And I read it. I said, well, this is written, sounds better than what you usually write. But what specifically in here is something you saw the person you're recommending? What did that person do that you think is important that you want to put in letter of recommendation? Where is that? She said, oh, there is nothing. I just use ChatGPT. You see, why do we have letters of recommendation? It's not just a box ticking. It's, oh, I wrote the letter of recommendation. They're used because the writer is supposed to be able to offer some kind of insight into the person's work.
Yes.
That we can't get from grades and all that. Just something that says, she worked on this project with me and she did this, this, and this. I was really impressed. That was really good. None of that exists. You see, the reasons for things get forgotten. People just think, oh, we'll just apply ChatGPT to this, as if we're box ticking, when in reality, right, that's why we had the letters of recommendation. And so if we don't do that, we shouldn't have letters of recommendation. There's a whole bunch of things that ChatGPT can do that if ChatGPT does it, we shouldn't do them anymore.
Yeah.
Because they're not giving us something we want. We're not looking for more emails. We're not looking for more reports. We're not looking for more recommendation. We're looking for better decisions about who to hire, which projects to fund, how to design something. That's what they're being done for. And people have forgotten about that.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm most negative about ChatGPT. Now, there are people who understand that and then use it in the right way. But the vast majority of people, no way. They're going to game the system. They're just going to produce as many emails as they can, and then they'll show up on the box ticking as they're doing a lot of work, but there won't be a useful idea in there.
Oh, actually, even worse than email, we've seen lawyers using it for their live cases, and they present these cases to judges. Judges basically would be like, I think judges can now tell that something is written by ChatGPT, and they absolutely eviscerate the lawyers for it, and rightly so.
Yeah,
because it's dangerous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. But it should be an easy problem to solve to have the correct cases. You just have to run it through some kind of other software that says, do these cases exist?
Mm.
Or you link up the two software systems. But, not everybody is trying to think so clearly.
But that goes back to the verticalization thing, because lawyers, my lawyers, for example, they have a piece of software that use smart search. I mean, they're not using ChatGPT, but because to them, ChatGPT could, or any generative AI, not just ChatGPT, it could potentially hallucinate. But they use it, but they are using AI powered search, which has nothing to do with LLMs, and it works. Again, but that's an example. And I think the issue as well, I think that people now, again, because they're misinformed, they think generative AI is quote unquote the AI. I know somebody in the UK government that told me directly that there are people within government and within government departments that believe AI was invented 3 years ago. And they are the ones that are pushing policy for AI. And I'm thinking, well, this is actually dangerous. This is literally, it's like somebody says, to me, I would go as far as saying this is RFK Jr. type level of danger. Like, if you believe that AI was invented 3 years ago and you are responsible for pushing policy, this is dangerous. You should not, you're not qualified to be in that position ever.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people want to believe things, and so they believe them. They want to believe that innovation is easy because they want to get some innovation out there and they'll get reelected. I mean, the current prime minister of UK is terrible. He's doing this. He wants to give ChatGPT services for free to people because he thinks it's going to improve their productivity, and it's ridiculous. Yeah. But he's not the only one. Most leaders are like this. Trump is misguided in the same way. But even these CEOs, they get proposals and they want to fund the one that's most optimistic.
Yes.
And basically what they're encouraging people to do is to lie, just make up stuff. And they don't realize it. They don't realize they've done this and that's all they're going to get. They're going to get lies. People with good ideas in AI or anything are oftentimes pushed to the side because they just don't bullshit enough. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate we have too much of that. And it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. It will take, if the bubble, when the bubble pops, a lot of people will be asking questions. And I think a lot of people who have been silent for a long time will finally speak up and say, wait, we were, funding stuff we shouldn't have funding. We were believing stuff we shouldn't have believing. And so hopefully then that will cause a change in the way things are done.
How bad do you think the bubble will be? You sort of alluded to that earlier, but I mean, compared to the .com and the financial crash, the big recession, 2008, in theory, we did actually have a recession during the pandemic, but again, governments tried to manipulate the numbers a bit to make it look less. I mean, was it Biden at the time that said actually he redefined the meaning of recession so that it doesn't look like a recession or something ridiculous like that? But on a serious note, once the bubble bursts, I think it's going to be horrible. I think it's going to be the worst thing that we've ever seen. But you've got more experience in that. So
I tend to agree with you. I went back and I looked at the 2000 bubble, and I quoted those numbers early on about the fact that there was a lot of revenues, right? People were investing money. It's very simple investment. You put money in, you get money out. It's not really that much money. And if you're not getting enough money out, the bubble's going to pop. Mm-hmm. And it's oftentimes hard to find profits, right? Profits take a long time. Mm-hmm. And you can even back up further and say productivity takes a long time. Yes. So there's a lot of apologists for AI who say, well, it just takes a long time for productivity to come out. Yeah, but I'll tell you, it doesn't take any time for revenues to come out. You look back at the computer revolution, all the way back to mainframe computers, there were revenues. Mm. Now, maybe there was an impact on productivity, but there were revenues. Companies were paying for computers because they thought they improved productivity. And so I'll believe them. They probably were improving productivity, just not very much. But they got more benefits.
Even Apple, when they started out, when they were building Apple One tiny crappy little wooden boxes, they were making money from that. They were buying that too. They were to make that point as well.
Very early. They had revenues. They were profitable very early. So you look at the revenues from the computers and what else I said, e-commerce and internet subscriptions. There was big revenues, $1.5 trillion in 2024 dollars. These are big. And now you look at the revenues, 5 billion last year for AI software, maybe 20, 30 billion, I don't know, 25 billion. Whatever it is, it's tiny compared to that 1.5 trillion. And yet the money being invested in AI infrastructure is more now than it was in 2020 for internet infrastructure. And if you adjust it for inflation, it's bigger. So you got more money going in and less money coming out. And it's scary. You know, the bubble popped in 2000 despite having all these revenues.
Yeah.
Right? It was a lot because a lot of these companies were way over evaluating, you know, Nokia and Qualcomm and Cisco. Cisco was the most valuable company in the world at that time. It was building this infrastructure. And we didn't need so much infrastructure, right? That's what's scary, is that now we have small revenues and we got more infrastructure. Well, what's going to happen to a company like NVIDIA, right? What's going to happen as soon as people, you know, if, like, for example, if the prices go up, that's kind of what I argue is going to cause this bubble to pop. In a Market Watch article a few days ago, the prices go up, people will use less of Chat GPT. You know, that's not a hard argument. That's just supply and demand, right? The prices go up, and you got to realize that it's double, right? The costs are more than double what the revenues are.
Yeah.
You know, I've had people tell me, well, we subsidize solar cells and electric vehicles and blah, blah, blah. That was like 10%. Now we're talking about, you know, 100%, 150%. You're going to see a big drop in cloud service demand. And then there's going to be, you know, what's NVIDIA going to do? What are you going to do with those those factories, those data centers, right? And these data centers take a long time to build. There's a whole backlog of these data centers right now.
Yeah.
They take like 5 years to build, you know, from planning to making them work. It's 5 years. So we've definitely, in this pipeline, we have too many. Somebody's going to lose money. Now, what will happen then when they lose money, NVIDIA loses money? Well, the prices of the data services will go down because there'll be excess capacity. So they'll find a new equilibrium. But, you know, where will that equilibrium be? It will certainly be less, less demand for data services, these AI data centers, than exists now. So a lot of companies are going to have trouble. And, it's hard to say how bad it is, but I agree with you. It's going to be worse than the dot-com bubble popping. The dot-com bubble popped, but the internet kept growing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of questionable with AI. You know, I assume that when the software prices go up, then we'll get a very good idea of what's economical and what's not. You see, right now everybody's using it with prices that are too low. So when the prices rise to some reasonable level, then we'll find out what's economical and what's not, because people will stop using it right away. I mean, if it's too expensive, they will stop using it. And so we'll get a better idea. Because right now, we don't have an idea of what's economical or not because the prices are set too low. It's really terrible. You know, price signals are really important. You can usually judge what's being done as being reasonable because, you know, they're getting the right price signals. But when the prices are set too low, we don't know. And so it's going to take a while to sort that out. And in the meantime, a lot of people are going to lose money.
Yes.
Yeah.
For those of you who followed me for a while, you would know that I'm neurodivergent, meaning that my brain is kind of unpredictable. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It has its own mind, so to speak. But one of the things that I really did struggle with my entire life, including today, is focus. So I was terrible at school as a result of that. I couldn't focus at university. I can't even focus when I'm working on my desk. And the big problem for me was figuring out ways to help me do that. The strategy that worked for me my entire life was actually music. But I would spend hours, literally hours, figuring out the songs that work best for a particular mood, whether I wanted to focus on something or I wanted to relax or wanted to sleep. Whatever it is, I would have to find the right song for that. And it kind of worked, though it wasn't predictable. Like I said, I would waste a lot of time trying to figuring out until I discovered our new partners, Brain FM, who actually used real science to figure this issue out and build an app that creates functional music engineered to sync with your brain. I'm telling you guys, this is real science, because they actually created a patented approach that as many of your brain cells, your neurons, are bringing all of the electrical signals to focus collectively into that one task that you're doing, or even if you want to relax or if you want to sleep. I absolutely love the interface. It's super simple. You can just choose what it is that you want to do, whether you want to focus, you want to relax, sleep, or meditate. And you can build your own list of some of the favorite songs that they produce. And I have to highlight that a lot of these songs are actually produced by real human composers. And it's lovely, lovely app that you can download onto your computer, your mobile phone, or you can just listen to it online. It's really simple. It's really cool. But above all, it works. If it works on my brain, it should work with your brain as well. So if you check out brain.fm/CEOR, and you'll see a dedicated page to our podcast, and you will get an exclusive, really, really long free demo that you can just download the app and listen at your leisure. No limitations. You can try it for yourself and see if it works. Let me know if it does work for you, because I absolutely fell in love with this thing so quickly, like within a couple of weeks. And I thought I have to reach out to these guys, because also I want to support independent businesses. So check out brain.fm/CEOR, and the big thanks to Brain FM for supporting the podcast. And now back to the episode. Because you mentioned NVIDIA, because I've got some data in front of me. I think it was published yesterday. Because it was obviously NVIDIA was showing their financial performance in the last quarter. I don't know if you saw this.
Yeah.
And they saw that 85% of all of their revenue last quarter came from just 6 companies. So one company, and again, it's a mystery, like that, they don't know who it is. So I think one company accounts for 23% of the total revenue.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, because NVIDIA as well, they've done what you sudgested as well. They actually were quite clever, because they actually put the prices of their GPUs up very quickly, like just at the beginning of the hype. It's like they just, blew it up, which is a smart move, which to me, I think it suggests that they know what's coming. But I think this is really a great indication that, if a company like NVIDIA is dependent on just 6 companies, all it takes is for that one company that pays 23% of the revenue to say, you know what, sorry, NVIDIA, we're out of cash. We're not going to pay you anymore. That's 23% drop, just like that, from one company.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, those companies are pretty
Cisco,
big,
isn't
though.
it? Sorry?
Yeah. Those companies are pretty big.
Yeah.
Google,
they're not going to continue buying it, are they, for forever?
Microsoft.
There'll be a point.
No, I agree that's going to happen, but they may not go bankrupt, and so the bankruptcies it'll be more that their share prices go way down. And then that will be a problem for certain people who they had bought those shares at really inflated prices. And so everybody's trying to sell them all at once. And some people are going to lose a lot of money on that. And it's not just data centers and the AI software companies, but it's like other semiconductor companies, it's power companies, right? These power companies are being asked to build new electrical generating plants.
Yeah.
Well, these things are really expensive. They take years. And again, there's a very long, it's 5-10 years if you're talking about fossil fuels. If it's solar, it's a little less, but still, you're going to have people putting in too much electricity.
Yes.
And then the drop comes, and what are they going to do with that? They kind of sit around. So somebody is going to lose a lot of money. So you're right. It could be a very big recession.
So which company do you think could be the trigger point? Because in the .com it was Cisco, as you said, like they oversupplied, and then people realized that, okay, we don't need that much stuff from Cisco. And even though they were making money, but then of course that was the pop, wasn't it? I think it's NVIDIA actually, because NVIDIA I don't think NVIDIA will die or anything like that. That will be. I'm a fan of NVIDIA. I love their product, so I hope that doesn't happen. But I'm wondering if NVIDIA
doesn't make the chips, though. That's where the big money is invested.
Yeah.
So TSMC.
Right.
So they have invested in more capacity to handle all these orders from the NVIDIA.
Yeah.
So they're going to lose big money. But going back to the 2000 bubble, it's hard to say. I mean, I admit I'm not that an expert. I was following. Is what I was doing in 2000 was I was involved with mobile internet. Japan had really successful mobile internet, so I was involved with that. I was kind of ignoring the stock market and things. I was just working to find these first applications, so I was kind of ignoring it. I just, the stock market's going down. It just seemed irrelevant to me. But apparently, a big thing was the interest rates are raised. So Alan Greenspan, who coined the term irrational exuberance, there's a book called Irrational Exuberance written by Robert Shiller, and he won a Nobel Prize for it. He coined this term. He says there's irrational exuberance right now, so we got to raise interest rates. See, back in those days, it wasn't just goods and services inflation that the Federal Reserve was ignoring. It was asset inflation. And he saw the stock market going up so high, and he said, that's too much. Whereas now, right, Trump's anger, he wants to reduce interest rates to have more asset inflation.
Yeah. Oh, God.
He somehow thinks that he can just push this problem down the road, even though it's in his first year, and he's going to push it down the road, make it worse and worse. But that's what they've been doing, right? Jerome Powell, he did it in the Biden administration, right? As you mentioned in the lockdowns and stuff, all this stimulus spending and stuff, and it's a mistake. It's this is where it's come from. So it's unlikely. So an interest rate increase, could happen now. It's probably unlikely, but some people say the producer price, what is it called? The producer price index, on 0.9% in this last month. So the report came out like 2 weeks ago. So they think that then that will move to the consumer price index. Yeah. And what's coming up this morning. So, it's a few hours away. Yeah, I forget the name of it. It's another thing that excludes energy and excludes some things. So that will give us an indicator of whether or not they're going to reduce interest rates. So right now they think the interest rates are going to be reduced twice in this year. If they're not, the market will interpret that as a rate increase, and the market will go down. Boom. Now, whether that triggers this whole, a bubble breaking, I don't know. Usually it's a combination of things. So it could be that it was an interest rate increase in 2000, along with what you're saying, something about Cisco wasn't making enough money. And some of these others. There were some other companies, right? There was, a lot of infrastructure providers that went bankrupt, that were Global Crossing, and I think some others. It wasn't just infrastructure producers, but then the telecom companies. So a number of them kind of went under. So, maybe it's the price increase of ChatGPT services. Somebody increases those prices, that reduces the demand for data centers, and then that reduces the demand for NVIDIA, and interest rates don't go up, but they don't go down like people are expecting. So then suddenly people don't want to wait. Investors realize, well, wait a minute, this is not good. But it's usually some kind of herd mentality. It's hard to predict what can cause this to happen. So although I wrote that, Gary Smith and I, he's my co-author, we always write about this, that, I can't claim to be an expert on what causes bubbles to break.
But certainly I think it's safe to say that the picture that we have today is something that we've never seen before. I mean, I think...
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The only comparison I'm seeing people are using is the 1930s. Now, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that either. That the 1930s was the same sort of crazy level of hype, irresponsible presidents and so on. But I'm like, still, I don't think still as bad as Trump.
The 1930s didn't have much to do with new technology. It had to do with overcapacity. It had with people thinking there would be so much growth that they were building all these factories.
Yes.
And investors realized that, for a while it was great. Man, they're all these factories. Look at how many factories they're building. They're going to make so many cars and other things, and they're going to make so much money. But then people realized, well, no, they're building too many. So that wasn't technology. I mean, here, I guess was similar in that they're building too many data centers.
Yeah, yeah.
You also have the railroad boom. But what's of 1840s where That was a lot of infrastructure. But what's unique about this time is that the value chain is very complicated. So people focus on NVIDIA and say, NVIDIA, well, it's got increased demand. They don't recognize that, well, that increased demand because the increased demand for data services is coming from underpriced AI software. That's the big question that people should look at. Is it all underpriced? So people are using too much of the AI software. And they're using it because the prices are low. But if the prices rise to their cost, then there'll be less demand for AI data centers and for NVIDIA.
Well, in fact, it's like people, I can't remember who said this. I think it was on LinkedIn, where they were saying something along the lines that, there's a difference between living without ChatGPT and living without electricity. It's like we can survive easily without AI. We can survive very easily without all these software, but we can't survive without electricity, etc.
Yeah.
So therefore, people would happily not use ChatGPT if it's too expensive or there's a cheaper alternative. I think this is where I think Apple. I mean, I've been saying for a couple of years that I think Apple is the one that could be the big winner here because they stayed well clear from this whole hype, and they try to kind of build. Well, in my opinion, they're building AI. In my view, the way it's supposed to be built, it's on device, so it's private, and again, it's an accessory. It makes things better. It makes your writing, or your user experience better, your photo editing better. That's what AI. I mean, I think people need to understand that you and I, that people see us as skeptics, but I love AI. I committed my entire adult life for that. We are pro AI. We're not anti AI. We're just anti AI bullshit.
Yeah. Well, about the electricity, you can give up ChatGPT on electricity. Robert Gordon, he wrote The Rise and Fall of American Growth 2016, which got a lot of attention then. And the same problems exist back in 2016. It's not gotten much better. He said that, the productivity growth was higher in the late 1800s than it has been since 1940 or something. It's gone down gone down since 1970. It was a brief rise in the 1990s, but it's way down. And he goes through all the technologies that help people, and the one he says is the most important is running water. He always says,
"True."
Who would you give up your showers or your iPhone? Well, it's hard to find anybody who doesn't like to take showers. So it's, and now you look at ChatGPT and it's just not that important. And you're right, people are willing to give it up. I mean, there are people that are addicted to it because they, behavioral type things, and they use it a lot for software coding or something. But they'll be able to give it up. It's just that there'll be a lot of wasted money. And that's what bubbles are about. The AI people all want to say, well, the AI is getting better, or there's this and that, and it's the most used technology all the time. When you come through a bubble, it's all about money. You put money in, you get money out. But if you're not getting money out, then the valuations, stock prices aren't worth it, and they'll eventually go down. You can look at price to earnings ratios, but that's, I think, more useful for the whole economy. It's because the price to earnings ratios, they always apply to the whole economy and not just to these few firms. I think it's more important to focus on this value chain and how subsidizing the ChatGPT usage causes all this increased demand. It's not real demand.
Which kind of makes me laugh when I hear people going about this is the fourth industrial revolution and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a historian, but last time I checked, industrial revolution, I would interpret it as basically when we stopped using horses and started using cars, or we started using trains instead of carts. That's a revolution, right?
Well, the first industrial revolution was steam engines and
exactly.
Spinning jennies and weaving machines. And then we got
the things that we can't live without, by the way, the things that we can't give up. Literally, we would have to start using horses again if we give these up. Basically,
locomotives and telegraph in the 1840s. And then the second revolution is usually applied to the end of the 1800s when, like you said, cars and a long list of things. People want to say that Elon Musk is the greatest innovator. He doesn't compare to Thomas Edison. When you look at what he produced, it wasn't just light bulbs and the whole electricity system. It was moving pictures. It was music players, and some other things that I can't remember. But he was involved with so many things, much more than Elon Musk has done. I mean, electric vehicles are nice, but they're not as good as the first cars.
Yeah.
And Starlink is nice, but it's not like he created the whole internet. So, a lot of the greatest, what's that?
He came up. Well, actually, I think to be historically accurate, it's not him who came up with these things. It's he invested in companies like Tesla. It's not his company. People try to think that he is, but it's the I can't remember their names, which is a shame. I think we should remember their names. It's the two founders.
But he's what made it commercially viable. So that's important to me. I mean, you can say the same about Thomas Edison. He didn't make all the inventions. He had all these people working. He ran the lab. Hey, that's fine. But somebody runs the lab that well.
But he came up with the ideas. I mean, Elon Musk did not come up with the Tesla idea. That's not his idea.
Yeah, but he managed people that came up with better batteries that made the Tesla economically feasible. All those.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, the commercialization. That's why I say he's a great investor.
He was the only one who succeeded.
Yeah.
He figured out how to do that. We hired people who figured out how to do it. And the same thing with Starlink. It's pretty good. I mean, it's got 6 million users. It's and subscribers.
But it's not an industrial revolution still.
Well, no, it's not. It doesn't. And I know that the people who say that have a number of other technologies they're talking about. So they've been talking about solid state batteries and quantum computing and electric vertical and takeoff things. There's a whole long list of them, and they've all lost money. They're all almost bankrupt. They're just hanging on because these VCs have been able to raise subsequent money for generative AI, and they just use a little to keep their companies, alive. But they're never going to make it, or at least not in the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So that's the bigger story. If generative AI bubble pops, then these VCs won't be getting money back from the generative AI investments and won't have money to give these other startups. So there'll be a lot of other startups that go under. When the dot-com bubble burst, it took, I don't know, at least 15 years, 17 years before, venture capital's funding, 15 years of venture capital funding recovered. That's what will happen here. It'll be over. Trump may try to save it. That's the thing. That's the wild card, is that, Jerome Powell and Trump may try to reduce interest rates to 1% or, bail out companies, because that's what they did with Silicon Valley Bank. They bailed out the investors in Silicon Valley Bank. Some of them had money in Silicon Valley Bank that wasn't covered by that, I forget the law, where they compensate all the investors. People put money in the bank.
Remember.
But that's only up to a certain amount, and it doesn't include foreign ones. But he kind of, I think that Biden bailed out all of the domestic investors, people who put money in the banks that had more than 100,000 or whatever the limit had been. And so Trump may try to do that, right? They've been doing that all along, trying to reduce interest rates and just making the problem worse. An important part of capitalism is that companies go bankrupt. They've got these bad ideas, and we've been letting them stay alive. Get them out of here so that we can have other ideas. I'm sure there's some other ideas out there that are better than generative AI and many of the other things that the money's invested in now. Allow these companies to go bankrupt and go on to the next.
Well, it's the whole point of competition, isn't it? Market competition.
Absolutely, yeah. It's
and this is what worries me, actually. I talk sort of regularly about this on this podcast, I suppose, because I know we're running out of time, so that could be the last thing. Because I always try to give some kind of hope. But for me, the thing that I'm worried about, because I became an entrepreneur literally towards the end of the dot-com bubble. So we're talking about around 2002. And you're right. The investors weren't investing. There was a reputational issue. Like if you were to say that you were, and at the time, like people didn't know about tech entrepreneur, but if you were saying like I was an internet entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
People would be like, literally, they would like, don't talk to me, right?
Yeah.
However, at the time, banks were lending money.
Yeah.
Certainly in the UK, right? So that was pre-financial crash.
Yeah.
So for me, as a young entrepreneur, I had alternative sources of funding. I could get credit from banks. We're not talking about huge amounts. I think I always laugh with I think my first ever funding I raised was like £5,000 from my local bank or something. But it made a difference. I was a broke graduate. I had nothing, right? So for me, the fact that I had access to credit, it allowed me to build something from the start. And then eventually, after a few years, I started to get investors and so on. But today, what I'm worried about, that young entrepreneurs, they have zero access to any money. Because especially when this bubble explodes, my concern that it will be the end of entrepreneurship as we know it. Because, where do they go? These will be broke. Banks aren't lending. So unless you've got rich parents, what other alternatives do you have? And this is what worries me. So I suppose, I was about to say I wanted to give some kind of hope, which is, I'm not doing a great job. But I'm thinking for the younger generation, what can they do? Because at the end of the day, it's the younger generation that would have to rebuild the mess that we're going to be facing right now.
That's the next podcast we'll do. Advice for the young generation. Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose my advice for the young people it's that it's what Jeff just said earlier, is that you need to kind of open up your mind to everything around you. I think this is the reason why. One of the reasons why I do this podcast. I'm a tech entrepreneur. But I talk about so many different topics because all of these topics are absolutely part of your plan right now. If you don't like politics, tough luck. You need to now understand how politics works. Because I've seen so many businesses in America, for example, that supported Trump because they wanted tariffs. I'm like, how could you be running a business and you don't know that tariffs is a bad thing for your company? For example, we had the same here in the UK with Brexit. Businesses that voted for Brexit. I'm like, okay, that's bad. So I suppose my advice is that inform yourself outside your bubble. Like be great at physics or maths or whatever it is that you're great at. But the world is so interconnected right now. You being a great physicist literally means nothing. You need to know everything around your world.
There's a lot of good sources of information on YouTube. My son has been watching Mark Rober. He's an ex-NASA guy for years.
Yeah.
He builds all these things and all this crazy stuff that he tests it out, and it's very interesting. My son really likes it. I think there are things like that, and I'm upset that schools are just so focused on testing whether you can regurgitate this fact or that fact, or
and kids hate it.
A lot out there.
And kids hate it. They tell me. I go to schools occasionally. They invite me to speak, and a lot of kids, like I'm talking about 16, 17-year-olds who, they've done their exams. Like a lot of them got A's or whatever. But they would come to me afterwards, like not in front of their teachers. They would come to me and say, "Tim, I really don't know what to do with my life because I don't know what these things are doing. I've done the exams, but that means nothing to me." And I think that is bad.
You want kids to be thinking about this from a young age. What am I going to do? What is there out there? What is possible?
Absolutely.
You want them to be thinking about that.
Yeah. It goes back to the point I made, like try to inform, and that's what I do with my kids. I try to help look around to see what's going on. I ask the questions, like Pia was saying, right? Ask questions about anything, everything, everywhere. This is how you understand how the world works, and this is that's the way out. Because I think what we've seen in the last 2010s, I've been saying this a lot as well, and I know you've seen I say that on LinkedIn, that we've had a decade of charlatans, a decade of people who basically they managed to sell the lie. People chose not to listen to the experts, but unfortunately, a lot of experts, as you said, they're stuck in their own little bubbles as well. I think now we need a point where knowledge matters now. Real knowledge absolutely matters. Otherwise, we're doomed as humanity, I think.
I agree with that. Okay.
Yes. So next time we're going to talk about the future.
Yeah. Okay.
But Jeffrey, thank you so much. If people want to find out about your work, where can they go?
Well, there's my book, unicorns, hype, and bubbles. And my email is very simple, jeffreyleefunk@gmail.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jeffrey Lee Funk. I'm also on X, but I only have like 143 followers.
I think nobody cares about X these days. But yeah, but for everybody, the links will be in the description and in the episodes page as usual. Jeffrey, I'll see you around. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right. See you.
Take care. Well, my friends, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. Now, before I go away, if you are on YouTube, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. It really makes a massive difference for the growth of our channel. And if you're following us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you need to give us a star review. Apparently, your following means nothing unless you give us a star review. Don't ask me why, but give us whatever star review that you think is fair. And if you're not following us, what are you doing? Come on, man. It doesn't cost you anything. It really makes a big difference. I really, really appreciate your support. But also, if you've got cash to spare, consider to become a founding member. We are an independent medium. We're not reliant on any kind of company that gets money from Russian oligarchs or any kind of weird sponsorships or anything like that. All of the companies that work with us are genuine companies that I know and I like. But ultimately, it's the members, you guys, our subscribers, our followers, our founding members, or those of you who actually just donated us like $1 here, a couple of bucks there, $5 there. All of that makes a big difference. This is what makes us truly independent. We're not chasing clickbait because we don't want clickbait. We want facts. We want the truth. We want something that we can all aspire to and something that truly make us at least work harder to make the world a better place. Not just talk about it, but actually make it happen. And of course, it supports all of our campaigns as well. So my friends, thank you so much. Much love. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
You are listening to